Thomas Merton coming up. But okay, so this is the fourth in a series that we're doing, and it's entitled The Call of Life. How is life calling us to respond? And just so that you know, if you want to listen to the other ones or watch them, you can just use that little red card in the sort of seat in front of you. And if you want to go on our mailing list, the blue card's there, and you can just put it in one of the plates or whatever, and we'll get hold of it. So really, the question is, how is life calling us to respond? We're looking at what's required of us by life as we go about on our day. And we're taking guidance, the inspiration really from those lines from Micah 6:8. And those of you that don't know Micah 6:8, just to remind you. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And in the first week, we talked about the importance of listening to our hearts rather than just having our minds make us go in whatever direction. To find the wisdom of our heart, because it's out of the wisdom of the heart that we really should be responding to life. And Heather spoke about those divine capacities like peace and love and charity and joy and patience and kindness. Those divine capacities that mark out humanity, that differentiate us from animals. What differentiates us is our ability to self-reflect. And that self-reflection has led us to the discovery of a spark within us, which is why I'm here, and hopefully why you're here. A spark that not only gives us life, but with which we can identify and grow in awareness of that spark and take on some of the attributes of that spark within us. And that's what we call spirituality, the cultivation of a sensitive and rewarding relationship with eternal truth and love. Our cultivation of our spirituality is the cultivation of that little flame that's within us. And we looked at justice, which really means actually right judgment, and the fact that you can only really judge rightly. I think this is really important. You can only really judge rightly when your judgment takes place within an awareness of whatever perspective you're judging from. If you take a perspective of the law of the land, then right judgment is one thing. But if you take perspective of the laws of nature, it's different. We perceive life as being a whole load, most of us, of separate entities that are competing with each other for resources. Now, if we see ourselves as separate from everything, then we'll be fighting for resources, all the resources we can get, and defending ourselves from attacks from people who we think are going to steal and take our resources. If, however, we perceive that we're all part of one conscious whole, that each part of that whole is interconnected, which is both a spiritual and, I think, a scientific position, then our attitude will be different. The connectivity and the separateness will create different right judgments. A world that recognizes our intimate interconnectedness, recognizes that we share one consciousness and that we're brothers and sisters of a divine family, which is really where we're trying to come from. Right living is therefore clearly thinking, and right judgment coming out of this understanding. And last week we looked at, so the first one was act justly. Second one is love mercy. We looked at mercy. The Hebrew word is hesed, which actually means loving kindness. That's the root word in Hebrew. It means loving kindness. A bit like the Buddhist concept of metta, loving kindness, which implies acting with compassion towards all sentient beings with an awareness and appreciation of the natural world. And of course, the root word of kindness is kin, which means family, denotes family. So this idea of loving mercy, of loving kindness, is really, again, a description of ourselves as being part of the family of creation. And it's a nod to that unity of consciousness that enables us to have right judgment and practice loving kindness in the world around us. So we're asked to have right judgment, we're asked to have loving kindness, and today we're going to look at the idea is to look at walking humbly with our God. And I went downstairs there. When I'm looking up these words, you use, when you're doing that, you use Strong's Concordance. That's the sort of thing where you look up the Hebrew. It was all Greek to me, and I couldn't really understand what it was. It literally, and so it was Hebrew actually. So I went downstairs to the AJC, and I could see as I walked in. I think I said this story, but as I walked in, I think she was looking at me. Seema was looking at me, thinking, "What chairs have I left out? Is the heating being left on? I said, "Look, what is the Hebrew etymology for the word humble?" And she just totally opened up. It was lovely. So the Hebrew etymology, the word for humble is wehesana. Wehasana, Wesana. And when I chatted to Rabbi Seema, she said it had, in Hebrew, humble has connotations of modesty. And I thought it was quite interesting. I wouldn't normally have thought that, humble, modesty. It's really, the word means refraining from pushing out everything that we've got. And there's an aspect of acting with restraint, which is, right with humility, really, But modesty is quite nice. And that quote from Thomas Merton about, grappling with the nature of humility, it's really about giving up to God. I read this in a daily reading, which is why I got Donna to read it. God is so much greater than all our thoughts and acts and problems. And the best thing we can do is just forget ourselves entirely in God and go along with whatever God wishes. So let's keep praying, and let's hope we get lost in God, and this will help us bring more love into the world. And there's a sort of giving up, a bit of thy will be done-ishness about that aspect of humility. I don't know about you, but we're also keen to push our own agendas. We're very keen to sort of make what we want to have happen, to be the best we can be. That we often forget that we don't really, it's really not up to us to work out the answers. We just have to really walk humbly with our hearts open and just sense what needs to be done next. And I think the reason for this is we don't have the big picture. We can only see as far as our human horizons can see, and that's not very far. Most of us have lived, some of us are younger, but maybe 40 or 50 years. The divine mind is like, boom, out there. And yet we think that we know, this, our understanding is limited by those horizons. And that divine mind can see infinitely more than our limited understanding. And we're not even asked, I think it's interesting, we're not even asked to give anything up in doing that. Because the idea, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the idea is that spark, that divinity is within us. It's not something out there. It's not up in the skies, All so much tosh, it's not up there. It's within us, And you go right back to Moses at the burning bush, if you want the proof of it, Moses says, "Who shall I say sent me?" And God says to Moses, "I am who I am." That's what you to say to the Israelites, "I am has sent me to you." So he's really saying that Moses is carrying that divine spark within him. And, Jesus was the same. Jesus said when he was asked, "Where is the kingdom of heaven?" His answer was, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." So it's pretty clear that we're not being asked to give, there's something within us that we're giving up to ourselves. And there's a lovely, Merton quote, which I endlessly bore you with, but I'm going to bore you with it again because I think it's so great. And his idea of humility is this. He says, God utters me like a word containing a partial thought of himself. So we're a partial thought of God. A word can never be able to comprehend the voice that utters it. But if I'm true to the concept that God utters in me, if I'm true to the thought of him I was meant to embody, I shall be full of his actuality and find him everywhere in myself and find myself nowhere. I shall be lost in him, which really echoes what Donna was saying. That is, I shall find myself. We really truly find ourselves, not in our minds and our wonderful thoughts, we truly find ourselves by connecting with that spark that is within us. We are uttered by God. Each of us came in, are born, we were uttered into this world by God. And then we think, right, that's fine, thanks very much, I'll take over now. Right, this is what we're going to do. Boom, and that's how we go. And we continue doing that. We're uttered by God, and yet humility is in our not trying to understand what's going on. Heather mentioned last week from Psalm 139, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. I mean, we really don't know what's going on. What happens when you die? And people ask me that, and I will say, I don't know. I mean, I don't. Anyone that tells you that they do, I'd be very suspicious. I mean, politicians, they think they know what they're doing. They don't. They're just like you and me. They get up and think, gosh, what am I going to do today? It's exactly the same. It's not, though, the attitude of doing our best. It's the attitude of the heart seeking out what wants to be done and then going along with that. And I think that means a number of things. First, it means that we live our lives as our lives and not try and compare ourselves to others. I mean, so often, you think, why aren't I Deepak? Why aren't I famous in books? I mean, you just compare yourself all the time. You're not really comfortable just saying, hey, this is great. This is really okay. This is what I'm meant to be doing. And each of us does. We think, well, I'm not as good as this. I haven't got this. I haven't sold this number of houses. I'm just still trying to get going. Raya Khan reading last week, the wise go right to the core and leap beyond appearances. The foolish cleave to details and get ensnared by words and letters. Such people envy the accomplishments of others and work feverishly to attain the same things. You can see all around the world working feverishly. Be the best. Do everything you want to do. It's so tempting to try and emulate the lives of others, to be as successful as them, to be as giving, to be as good, to be as truthful, to be as faithful, to be as powerful, to be as ordinary, to be a good family person as anything we think we ought to be. We're comparing ourselves. It's difficult enough just to live our own lives than to try and emulate the lives of others. It's altogether too much hard work, and it actually gets us nowhere. So it's a great relief just to let that down. Instead, we listen to our hearts. We listen to the promptings from the perspective of loving kindness and right judgment, and based on understanding that, here's the key thing, based on the understanding that we're standing on holy ground. That's really what this means, that all of us are standing on holy, but we don't think we are. We think, we're standing on holy ground. Metaphorically, we should take our shoes off. Moses, when he approached the burning bush, when the Lord saw that he'd gone over to look, God called him from the burning bush, said, Moses, Moses, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place we're standing on is holy ground. I think we should take our shoes off. I think we should. I'm going to take my shoes off now. Just to denote that we're standing on holy ground. Because actually, it does feel very different when you're standing on holy ground. Everybody thinks, oh, well, this is great. And, no, it's all holy ground. That is, the humility is to know that we're walking on holy ground, wherever we are. That's the humility. And it feels, quite different, to be touching it. I feel like doing a Monty Python thing. He's taken off his shoe. Those who haven't seen The Life of Brian, I'm going to take off my shoe. Yeah, Heather's taken off her shoe. Follow me. It's terrible. He took off his shoe and he made us do it too. But notice, though, at Easter, when Jesus washes the feet, you have to take your shoes off. There's an action there of being in contact with it. But we prefer, all the layers that go with that. A remembrance that we're on holy ground. And so, how do we act when we're on holy ground? When we're thinking, right, I'm on holy ground, what happens is it brings us to our true home. And another thing I always bore you with, that lovely quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Our true home is the present moment. That's where it brings us when we take our shoes off. To live in the present moment is a miracle. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that's available now. Peace is all around us in the world and in nature and within us. It's our bodies and our spirits. And once we learn to touch this peace in our bodies and our spirits, we are healed and transformed. That's to walk humbly, to be healed and transformed. It's not a matter of faith. It's a matter of practice. This is taking that hand. We need only to find ways to bring our body and mind back to the present moment, which is why I'm taking my shoes off, so that we can touch what is refreshing, healing, and wondrous. To walk humbly is to walk in the present moment and respond in a loving way. But I do know it's difficult. And we're always thinking, am I in the present moment now? What about now? And there's a pressure. So I've got a way round this pressure. I've invented a way round this pressure of how to not go mad thinking of ourselves in the present moment. I find that the best way to stay is to live in now-ishness. Now-ishness. Now, what now-ishness is, it's living in now and what's next. So you're just taking that little bit. Now what's next? I'm going to sit down, listen to dance music. I can do that because I'm aware of what's happening, but I can let my mind go to what's next, which is listening to Dan. And I don't have to worry about, college fees and all this stuff. This is me right now. I don't have to worry about all that stuff because I'm just thinking about now and what's next. So I'd like to suggest that rather than desperately trying to live in the now, to live in the now-ish. Just to live in the now and what's. And do you know what that leaves me with? It leaves me in a state of joy. Because I'm not running ahead. I'm literally living in the now and just the next bit. There's receptions after this. That's okay. I can deal with that. There's food, there's drugs, coffee. And so I can live in that. And now-ishness means that I don't rush on to what I'm doing after the service or next week or worry about things that are not in the now-ish. That's now or what's next. But generally, what's now and what's next limits the mind's capacity to speculate. And therefore, we're left with the joy of living. We don't have to even worry about being in the now because you're not being so dictating to yourselves. And that's, I think, what humility is about. The humility of accepting our home as being in the present moment and welcoming what's to come next without trying desperately to work out what it means. To walk humbly with our God is to go out into the world as on holy ground and to walk where we're led and to know that the life we're living has meaning. The life we're living has meaning, even if we don't understand how, because our understanding is limiting our horizons. And we don't have the perspective of the universal understanding or the universal mind of the divine. So that's part one. Now and what's next is Dan coming along to sing. And when Dan starts singing, the now-ishness would be, Heather's going to speak after Dan. So okay. This is how far we're looking ahead. Okay, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. I feel like I'm on sacred ground, I do. Thank you. So just a few more musings about humility. To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So that's what we're talking about here. The word humility, like the word human, comes from the Latin word humus, meaning the earth or the ground. I mean, that says a lot already, don't you think? That there's something about being close to our own ground, our own true nature, that puts us in touch with humility. Humility is one of those divine capacities. To me, it's more like a substance or a fragrance, not something we can fabricate or manufacture. I don't even think it's something we can create or cultivate. I think what we can do, though, as James Findlay would say, is cultivate that inner stance that offers the least resistance to being infused with humility, just as with all the other divine capacities, joy and peace and patience and gentleness. But in the end, they're all a gift. They're given to us. They're divine. None of these qualities can be forced or willed into being. They're the byproducts of living in alignment, of living with a singleness of heart, of living out of our true nature. Isn't it interesting that a humble person has no idea they're humble? To me, that's so cool. It's yet another example of how wisdom, or the kingdom of heaven, or the Tao, whatever you would want to call it, doesn't draw attention to itself. It's not in its nature to draw attention to itself. That's what makes humility such a beautiful quality. It's really not something that can be taught, but more something that hopefully we all get to sense from time to time in each other. We know when we've been in the presence of humility. By the way, I see it in so many of your faces this morning. Because at least in my experience, I know that I'm somehow brought home to myself. Something in me is stilled. And I'm returned to a sense of wholeness and repleteness in myself. That's what humility does to us. It's for me hard to put my finger on it, but there's something about a humble person's radical self-acceptance. Their ability to accept reality and their own reality just as it is, that then helps others around them to feel into that same sense of generosity and expansiveness of spirit. There's a sense of radical okayness. I think true humility is just too rare these days. But I know, at least in my experience, there's nothing more beautiful. Maybe it's so difficult because it's so incredibly countercultural. Nothing in our society encourages humility. Modesty, perhaps, and I was interested what you were saying about modesty, but to me, modesty is that sense of not showing off too much. You know, society, we like that, you know, but that's kind of, to me, more akin to a kind of false humility, maybe, where the ego still has the upper hand. True humility is of an entirely different order. A humble person knows that they do not know. Or they know things, but they balance that knowing with not knowing. And also with unknowing, in that they have a willingness to unlearn things, a willingness to let go of tightly held beliefs that no longer belong, the willingness to change course, to see things from multiple perspectives. There's a willingness to be wrong. I think religions, and I'm going to pick on Christianity because that's my home base, have not been great exemplars of humility. Christianity has been quite big on certainty, where seemingly beliefs are considered to be what's important. How odd that this should be the case, when clearly having the correct beliefs can so easily lead to judgment and exclusion and division. And nowhere do we hear from Jesus, "Be certain as your heavenly Father is certain." You know, at all costs be certain. That's just not the language of the kingdom of heaven. Have faith, yes, have faith, but a faith that is gently robust, and grounded in humility, with the willingness to not know fully. Jesus' whole vibe was not to be certain, but more, you're blessed when you're poor in spirit, when you don't know. That's when the kingdom of heaven is yours. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, he said. And blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That's so interesting to me. Meekness. Such a beautiful word and slightly different in nuance to humility, and so incredibly rare, I think, these days. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I can't even wrap my head around how far we seem to be from that beatitude. Think of what we're bombarded with on our TV screens. Think of the conversations that we're so easily drawn into. What's happened to meekness? That statement, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, that's a statement of truth, it's fact, it's reality. It's not just a lovely thing that Jesus said all those years ago. It points to something we humans have not yet understood and have still to live into. So I just mentioned that beatitude because I just think it's there's like a massive invitation, a crucial invitation for us, and we might just sit with it. And I've been awestruck just pondering that one line this week. But I think humility and honesty go hand in hand. Humility and honesty, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin. A humble person is ruthlessly honest. I just want to quote these few words from the poet David White, because he really nails it. So see if you can take these words from him in. Honesty is grounded in humility, and indeed in humiliation, and in admitting exactly where we are powerless. Honesty is not found in revealing the truth. Honesty is not found in revealing the truth, but in understanding how deeply afraid of it we are. To become honest is in effect to become fully and robustly incarnated into powerlessness. Honesty allows us to live with not knowing. We do not know the full story. We do not know where we are in the story. We do not know who is at fault or who will carry the blame in the end. Honesty is not a weapon to keep loss and heartbreak at bay, but honesty is the outer diagnostic of our ability to come to ground in reality, the hardest attainable ground of all, the place where we actually dwell, the living, breathing frontier where there is no realistic choice between gain or loss. So, to be truly humble, sorry, these are a lot of words, aren't they? There's a lot of words, but this is amazing to me. But to be truly humble is to be able to recognize and acknowledge our limitations and capacities. It's to be able to see who and how we actually are, with at least some objective clarity. To see ourselves not with self-judgment and self-deprecation, which would just be another ego game, but it has something to do with having a radical acceptance of how we actually are, as opposed to the idealized image we have of ourselves. And this is really difficult, especially in a culture, in a society that places so much emphasis and importance and value on image and on doing well, on competition and getting ahead. I mean, how are we supposed to live in a world, in the structures of society as they are, and be humble? And I look at the pressure on kids in the whole thing of getting into colleges and moving into their lives beyond school. Humility is not something that's ever mentioned or prized. I just think that's so interesting. How easy it is to create idealized, fabricated realities about ourselves and our futures. And then how easy it is to become ensnared or trapped by our own self-imposed expectations. How we can be our own worst enemy by having the impossible task of then having to live up to these manufactured standards and ego-based goals. So for me, all of this begs some really important questions for us, like individually and collectively. First of all, is humility something we value and that we want? And to just be honest about that. Like, has your heart been touched by a humble person? Has it been softened by that? If it is important to you, why? Why? And then we might ask, where in my life am I being dishonest? Where am I not being completely honest about who I am with others? Where and how am I pretending to be something that I'm not? Do I go around with an idea of who I am and who I want to be? Do I have an idealized, fabricated reality about myself? Do I sense a connection between my idealized self-image and my actual reality? Do you sense a disconnect between your idealized self-image and your actual reality of who you are, how you experience yourself? Can you dare to loosen some of that effort? The kind of effort, Nicholas spoke about this, it's so hard to maintain. It's tiring for the soul. What would it look like if you just let down all those defenses and just dared to just be? It's kind of a tender thing how we humans go around trying so hard to be something, rather than just getting that we're absolutely enough. Might we dare to lean into our true, deeper natures? To dare to experience what might feel like emptiness or an inner void, like there's nothing in there. A sense of, what am I without the image of myself that I present? The paradox here is that as we find the courage and commitment to do this, with the accompaniment of the divine, and maybe with at least one other, with each other, as we truly acknowledge and accept our limitations as well as our capacities, when we can be honest about our edges, then I think what happens is we find a true inner freedom, a kind of buoyancy and lightness of being, joy. We will then happen upon all these other divine capacities that we've spoken about as we drop our pretense and as we lean into ourselves with robust honesty. I think humility then is knowing and experiencing ourselves as the exact manifestation of the divine that we each are. That we simply are a creation, each one of us, an expression of divineness, of beingness. And like that quote that Nicholas mentioned from Thomas Merton, God utters me like a word, containing a partial thought of himself. A word will never be able to comprehend the voice that utters it. But if I'm true to the concept that God utters in me, if I'm true to the thought of him I was meant to embody, I shall be full of his actuality and find him everywhere in myself. That's humility. To be truly humble is to be truly free. Thank you.